Hello, I'm Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Now, in the television interview that you are about to see, I explain how millions of Commonwealth citizens, primarily from Nigeria, Pakistan and India, currently residing in Britain, including people who are only here on a 6-month student visa, are entitled to vote in the British general election, even though they are not British citizens and do not hold British passports. It's a quite remarkable situation that is almost unheard of anywhere else. In most countries, USA, Canada, Germany, France, one has to be a national citizen to vote in a national election. In Britain, that's not the case. Now, there were understandable reasons for this historically, but in this day and age, in this era of mass immigration, it's a policy that is absolutely indefensible, and it threatens the very foundations of British democracy. Because in future elections, these millions of foreigners could tip the balance in favour of one party or another, in particular in favour of the Labour Party, because we know that between 70 to 80% of ethnic minorities vote for the Labour Party. Indeed, one of the reasons that New Labour introduced mass immigration to Britain was in order to help it secure dominance over the Conservatives in future elections by bringing in people who were going to vote for it. And if you look at places like London, for example, a city that is now overwhelmingly a city of mass immigration, it's a plan that's worked because London is now essentially a one-party Labour state. Why is this? Well, it's because we got to the situation due to the unique status of Commonwealth citizens. Commonwealth citizens are not treated as being foreign. That's why in Britain, the Foreign Office's full name is the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. There's a distinction there. And originally, there was no such thing as a British citizen. There was only British subject. The term citizen is actually a Republican term. It's something that we associate with ancient Greece and Rome, with France, and with America originally. Wherever you were in the British Empire, by contrast, whether you were in Australia or Canada or Britain, you were all British subjects. And as such, if you were born in the colonies, you were entitled to the right of abode in the UK. And with that came the right to vote in elections. Now, originally, this was supposed to be an olive branch offering to the colonies. It was an attempt, really, to stop, or at least to slow down, decolonisation. In other words, to try to encourage Britain's colonies not to seek independence from the mother country, but to stay under British control. And it would have been seen by many in government and in the corridors of power as a harmless offering, because, back then, people stayed in the countries or the colonies in which they were born. Nobody in the early 20th century or the late 19th century expected Africans and Asians to move to the UK, so it was a largely symbolic gesture. Of course, the advent of the jet plane and general improvements in the ease of intercontinental travel has meant that this harmless gesture is now at risk of causing real harm to British democracy. You could call it the Empire Strikes Back, or maybe the British Empire Strikes Back. And I say this as somebody who is and always has been a champion of the Commonwealth and of the Commonwealth realms in particular. But with millions of Commonwealth citizens arriving in the UK in the past decade, I'm afraid that mass immigration has made this quaint anachronistic policy completely indefensible. Anyway, here's the video.
Hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of foreign nationals are eligible to vote in UK elections. In 2023 alone, 250,000 Indians, 141,000 Nigerians, 83,000 Pakistanis, 35,000 Ghanaians, 33,000 Bangladeshis and 21,000 Sri Lankans migrated to the UK. Now they, as Commonwealth citizens, received full voting rights on arrival. Strangely, Zimbabwean nationals can also vote in the UK, despite the country being thrown out of the Commonwealth in 2003. 36,000 of those migrated to the UK in 2023. Citizens of Ireland, too, a non-Commonwealth country, can take part in our elections, although that right is reciprocal. Now, the government-funded UK Council for International Student Affairs has put out a helpful voting guide for foreign students, who are only supposed to be here for a couple of years, but will have a say in a parliament that will last far longer than that. Now, joining me now is Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. And Rafe, why are Zimbabwean nationals allowed to vote in British elections?
You might well ask that question. It does quite specifically state in the terms of the legislation underneath Commonwealth citizen that the right still applies even if your home country is thrown out of the Commonwealth. Even that citizenship sustains itself. And, you know, I'm a great supporter of the Commonwealth and of the Commonwealth realms. Just yesterday, I attended an event with the former Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, Conservative Friends for CANZUK, which is all about supporting greater alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK. But the idea in the 21st century that 55 other Commonwealth nations, that their citizens residing here have the right to vote, when someone from India, for example, could come here on a 6-month student visa and vote during that 6-month period is patently absurd. It's an imperial hangover. It goes back to the era...
Rafe, I thought you were all about imperial hangovers.
God, I love the romance of it, but you know, quite often in life, romance and reality are very different things. You know, at one time, there was no distinction amongst the British Empire, whether you were from Christchurch, New Zealand, or Melbourne, or Vancouver, or Glasgow, or Nairobi, or Delhi. You were all equally British subjects under the law.
And free movement.
And with free movement entirely. Canada destroyed that notion by having its Citizenship Act of 1947, and it was after that that countries began to have their own independent policies. Britain came out with this 1948 Nationality Act, which essentially said that anyone born in the colonies has the right of abode in the UK. That, of course, was what led to the beginnings of what we now regard as mass migration. And ever since then, of course, the right to vote has continued.
And yet, from a traditionalist standpoint, from a monarchist standpoint, from a standpoint looking at sort of how the incredible contribution the United Kingdom has made to the world can be continued, furthered, is this not an institution that is strengthened by maintaining those links?
Well, it depends, of course, how you look at it, because there's a clear political bias here. Because we know, for example, that between 70% and 80% of ethnic minorities vote for the Labour Party. We saw that in 2005, 2010. It's been replicated. So we have here a huge tranche of voters who are actually supporting one party over another party. Why the Conservative Party, after 14 years in government, there was even a commission with Lord Goldsmith that suggested this, the Tory Party, perhaps because also there are many imperialist romantics there, didn't want to do away with that. But the result is, you know, that there are more than 10 million foreign-born people in this country today. Around half of them arrived within the last decade. There's around 5 million people. It's probable that there are therefore between 2 to 4, maybe even 5 million Commonwealth citizens in this country. Now, in this election, that may not prove decisive, but in previous elections, there's only been a 2 million vote difference in the vote share between Labour and Tory. So we're talking about potentially in the future the government of this country being decided by non-citizens.
So what reform would you suggest in order to perhaps equalise or rationalise this model?
Well, the first thing, of course, would be to abolish any rights of voting for those countries that don't have reciprocal arrangements. As you said, you know, Ireland does have that. Some of the Caribbean nations have that. Canada abolished the right of British subjects to vote in their elections in 1975. In 1984, Australia also got rid of that. I think we simply just need to move with the times and follow the Canadian and Australian models. Because it can't be right when there are so many student visas being issued that people who are here for a matter of months, all they need is just have an address and they can vote in this country.